all know about Cooper Flagg and Johni Broome, but it's almost guaranteed that an unexpected player is going to be key to securing victory in the Final Four.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Happy Friday. It's the only daily national college hoop show out there. We're your hosts. This guy over here is Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Schade. You're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you so much for making us your first listen or watch of the day. And we want to remind you that you can catch every episode ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out to all the everydayers joining us, and of course, the great Locked On College Basketball Discord community. This episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Head on over to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from. You need one right now? No problem. Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. Stock up today and stay energized. Whoo, Andy, it's time for our Final Four preview show ahead of tomorrow's semifinal action. So we're going to make some picks, talk X factors, going to talk about who needs this the most. I'm going to quiz Andy on some game lines, all sorts of fun stuff, a couple quick injury updates, and then we'll dive in. Johni Broome, that's the biggest one, Andy, National Player of the Year, co-front runner with Cooper Flagg. Broome himself said on Thursday, after, by the way, he was a full participant in practice, John Fanta, I guess I should say, said, quote, Auburn superstar Johni Broome was a full participant in practice today and says he's 100% for Saturday. Andy, I should note that as Johni Broome said that, he's wearing an arm-length compression sleeve on his right arm. Alex Condon on Thursday around 3 p.m. Eastern said, quote, my ankle is feeling pretty good. I'd say it's about 80 to 90% right now. As for Malik Brown from Duke, we've seen him working back in a little bit here and there, wearing a shoulder harness thing. And so expect him to play a few minutes on Saturday. Game details very quickly. Florida versus Auburn, the West versus the South region. This is the left side of the bracket. Tips off first, 6:09 Eastern on CBS. FanDuel has it Gators -2.5. That'll be followed approximately 8:49 p.m. Eastern by Duke out of the East and Houston out of the Midwest. CBS, FanDuel has it Blue Devils -5.5. As a reminder, second time ever, all four number one seeds have made this Final Four. And Andy, we're going to get right into X factors, and we're going to start with players, and we're going to start with Florida Auburn, the first game of the night. Andy, who is your X factor player in the Auburn Florida matchup?
I'm going with Miles Kelly from Auburn. And I wanted to pick somebody who, obviously you could go with Johni Broome or Walter Clayton. They're the two superstars in this game, two players who succeeded last time these two teams played, two players who are having excellent NCAA tournaments. But for an X factor, I wanted to go with somebody that maybe we haven't seen have as explosive of a tournament, but who has the ability to really turn this game in favor of the Tigers. And that's why we go with Miles Kelly, who was very good in the one time that Auburn and Florida played each other back in February. He had 22 points in that matchup, and he had 7 made threes in the first NCAA tournament game this year, which was against Alabama State. But he's really struggled since then. He's 3 of 18 since then. He's made exactly 1 3 in each of Auburn's subsequent games in the NCAA tournament. But we know that he's a high volume 3-point shooter, that he's at times a highly effective 3-point shooter. He's been a bit streaky at times, but I can think of very few things that would dramatically impact Florida's chances of winning this game more than if Miles Kelly or somebody from Auburn were to get really hot from 3. It just creates a spacing issue. It makes it more difficult to defend Johni Broome. If Kelly's moving all around the floor and able to hit threes on the move, that's just a huge challenge. Florida has the length. They have the 3-point perimeter defense to be very effective in that area. But if somebody like Kelly gets going, I could see that being a problem for the Gators.
I love that pick, Andy. I am going to go with somebody from the other team. I'm going to choose Mr. Alijah Martin for a couple reasons. Number one, quite literally, he didn't play in the first matchup this season between Florida and Auburn. So almost by definition, he is an X factor in this thing. And the other reason, Andy, I would say is because he is the lone player in this game bringing Final Four experience into it from the player side of things. He obviously 2 years ago was on that Final Four run with FAU, and now he's back. And I think it's easy to potentially mitigate the importance of that, Andy. But literally, I've been reading comments all day Thursday of players walking into the Alamo Dome and just like commenting on, wow, this is so big and all that kind of stuff. you have a guy that's been there before in an equally as big arena who can say, do the Hoosiers thing, right? Like, sure, but it's the same dimensions as our whatever. And so like that kind of stuff, I think is really critical for keeping everyone grounded and attentive and all of that kind of stuff. And not to mention that Alijah Martin, oh, by the way, is also the second leading scorer on this team. Right. So having him back for this rematch against a team that Florida already beat in Auburn, I think it's a big deal, Andy. Let's switch to the nightcap. Duke, Houston, who is your X Factor pick for that game?
I'm going with Emmanuel Sharp. And on the bracket breakdown show, when we picked X Factors, I was consistent with Miles Kelly, but I went with Terrence Arsenault on the breakdown show. And I still am a believer that Arsenault coming off the bench could be somebody who has a big role in this game. But I'm going to go with the starter, the player who's kind of playing in front of Arsenault for Houston, and that's Emmanuel Sharp. Really good three-point shooter. Again, I mentioned three-point shooting as a big factor in the first game. I'll mention it here too. Duke, obviously fantastic three-point defense, fantastic overall defense this year. But for Houston, I think the big question for them is less about the defense for them. We know they're a very good defensive team. They're going to have their hands full with Duke, but the question is, how is Houston going to score? Like they're going to need to score quite a few points in this game to be able to beat a very efficient Duke team. And Emmanuel Sharp and his outside shooting feels like a huge factor. I think that Houston's bigs, who are not known for their offense, not known for their scoring, are going to struggle against Malawach and Cooper Flagg. So you need scoring from somebody not named LJ Cryer or Milos Uzan. And I think that's where Emmanuel Sharp, who averaged about 13 a game this year, again, shot 41.5% from three. I think that his floor spacing, his outside shooting, his secondary creation as the other guard for this team is critical for them being able to pull off what would be an upset over Duke.
Andy, I'm going to go again with somebody from the other team, and I'm going to choose Tyrese Proctor. Here's why. All the attention, obviously, Cooper Flagg. But when you take the attention off of Cooper Flagg, who do we move to? Con Knipple. And if we take our attention off of him, it's probably Common Malawach, right? Like we just keep working our way through players, and we forget that Tyrese Proctor is the guy from this team that has been on this team as a starter now for multiple years, and kind of helps Duke carry on their Duke identity. And it matters in a similar way to what I talked about with Alijah Martin, right? Of helping keep people grounded. And obviously he hasn't been to the Final Four yet, missed out on that by a year, came just a year after Duke made the Final Four in 22. So there is that of like really helping ground this team in that way. Yeah. But then also this dude has been on absolute fire from beyond the arc in the NCAA tournament. In his 3 years of college, he's grown in his three-point shooting each year. His first year, 32% from three on 4.1 attempts a game. Last year, jumped to 35.2% on 5.2 attempts a game. And then this year has shot, Andy, 41.2% from beyond the arc on 5.8 attempts a game. I mean, that's just crazy. Like we've talked about how good he's been in the tournament, but the dude has shot over 40% on more than 5 attempts all season long. And it's just crazy, Andy. But in the tournament, it's been at another level. He was 13 of 16 in the first weekend. In totality, through the first 4 games, he's 16 of 25, 64%. In my opinion, Andy, and I think you would probably agree with me here, if Proctor is going to continue to do this, combined with everything else that Duke has at their disposal, that they're literally almost invincible, in my opinion.
Yeah, if Tyrese Proctor shoots makes 7 threes like he did in the early games, I think that's going to be curtains for Houston. But Isaac, we also want to do some X factors, like statistically, not just players, but actual stat ones. I'll go here for Florida Auburn. For me, it's 3-point shooting, and I know that that's really vague, but both these teams are top 10 defensively in terms of 3-point defense. I think they're 6th and 8th respectively. And then both these teams are kind of right around the same way. Offensively, both teams are like 36% from three in the 65 to 70 range on KenPom. So to me, whichever team defends the 3-point line better, that's going to be a huge X factor in this game. I know that seems kind of obvious, but both these teams are so good in that area that I think it's going to be interesting to see who can get their shooters better looks. Does that give an advantage to Florida with Walter Clayton be a really good 3-point shooter? I'm intrigued to see how the 3-point shooting kind of matchup plays out between these two SEC teams.
Andy, something I've actually been kind of tracking this all season long is Florida's offensive rebounding, and it's been absurd. They're right now 5th nationally at 38.9% offensive rebounding percentage. And what I like, Andy, is it really feels like it comes from a multitude of sources. It's not just because of the depth of their front court with Condon and with Hauk and with Chinyelu and with Handlockton now. But it's also, you've got these athletic, thick guards that are able to get in there and do it too. And so for Florida, if they can just get shots up on the rim and then go get it and get a bunch of second chance points, I think that's just as beneficial as shooting really well, right? And so for the Gators, I think that could be a very critical dynamic in making sure that they're sticking with Auburn in everything that Bruce Pearl's club is doing. So, Andy, let's now turn our attention to the nightcap and X Factor stats in this game. What you got?
Yeah, Duke Houston, I'm going with tempo for this one because Houston plays at one of the slowest tempos in all of college basketball. I think KenPom has them 360th in the country in terms of tempo. Meanwhile, Duke they hold teams to one of the slowest tempos in terms of their defense. I think their defense in terms of average possession length for the opponents is also 360th. So the reason I bring that up is because Duke wants to make their opponent play slow. Duke wants their opponent to play at one of the slowest places in college basketball. Houston already does that. So where is the advantage there? Is the fact that Duke's trying to slow Houston down where Houston's already comfortable playing slow, does that mean it's an advantage for Houston? Does the fact that what Duke's trying to do defensively happen to line up with what Houston already does? That could also be an advantage for Duke too. So it's kind of going to be an interesting element of this game. Does Duke try to play faster to speed up the game? Is Houston able to effectively slow Duke down? Duke doesn't play at a super fast tempo either, but it's still faster than Houston. So to me, the overall matchup between these two teams from a tempo perspective, I think is going to be an interesting element of this matchup. And I think we'll have a big determination in who wins it.
Andy, for mine, I'm going to go with Houston and their three-point shooting, and more specifically, the volume of their three-point shooting. Here's what I mean. The Cougars, Andy, are second in the nation in three-point percentage at 39.7% as a team. That's absurd. Like, you salivate when you land an individual player sitting at 37% or better, right? Like, but the thing is, and we've talked about this multiple times now, but the Cougars don't take a ton. They're 273rd, shooting just 20.6 attempts from three for the game. For me, in order to beat Duke, they've got to up the amount of attempts in this game. They've only attempted more than 30 just once this season. That was 34 against BYU. Let's remember, Alabama had 51 attempts against that same BYU team just last weekend. And that was also the game, Andy, that they made the most they've made this season, 16, which is the only time that they've made 15 or more. So, Andy, I really think if Houston wants to win this game, not that they need to abandon what they do inside the arc, because I think that's important, as is getting to the line we've talked about. But I do think they need to up their three-point quotient and continue to make them at the rate that they do. Even if it drops 2 or 3 percentage points, I think they're still in great shape.
Well, Isaac, we're going to go ahead and move on and make our picks for these Final Four games. I'm going to guess the odds for the hypothetical national championship matchups. We're going to talk about the fact that the number 1 overall seed coming into the tournament actually has the longest odds to take home the trophy. All that and more coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, life moves pretty fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. And that's why securing their future is so important. And Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get long-term life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You could be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is even required. As a parent, I want to make sure that my family is financially protected no matter what happens. And Fabric gives me that peace of mind. You can get $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. So protecting your loved ones, it doesn't have to break the bank. Fabric also offers free digital wills and access to investment accounts to help you plan for your child's future. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company. Not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions.
This episode's also brought to you by Prize Picks. You guys, baseball season is in full swing. Andy, it's pitiful. My Braves right now are 0-7.
It's a struggle bus for them.
It's bad. I am on the struggle bus. And there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for fantasy daily sports. With Prize Picks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections. And if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. So whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs, Prize Picks keeps every game exciting. Setting a lineup, man, it can take less than 60 seconds, and when you win, your payout is quick, safe, and it certainly is secure. I love to take advantage of Taco Tuesday, where Prize Picks offers discounts on selected player projections for even more value. So obviously, Andy, the basketball will end and we'll all move to baseball after Monday night. But for right now, we still have a little bit more Prize Picks projections here in the basketball world. These Saturday night semifinal games, more or less point projections. I got one from each team. Cooper Flagg, more or less on 19 points. Walter Clayton Jr., 21 points. LJ Cryer, 16. And Johni Broome, 20. Andy's giving you a thumbs up or thumbs down. He kind of looks like Julius Caesar over there in real time. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. As Andy said, we are now going to move from talking about some X factors in these semifinal matchups to actually making our picks for them. So, Mr. Patton, let's just go in chronological order here and see how aligned we are with who we think is going to wind up in the championship on Monday night. We got Florida and Auburn in round one. Again, Andy, the Gators favored by 2.5 in this thing. Who are you going with?
Well, for anybody who listens to our episode with Brandon Olson of Locked On Gators and Zach Blackerby of Locked On Auburn, you know that Brandon threatened to never come on the show again. So you could probably guess that means I'm taking Auburn here to win this one. They came in as the number 1 overall seed. I know Florida beat them in February. I know that game was at Auburn. I know Florida's the favorite. They've got some momentum right now, but Johni Broome being healthy, having that big moment where he came back in that game and hit that big 3, it just feels like there's so much kind of on this wave for Bruce Pearl's team. And I think the Tigers are going to make what will ultimately be their first national championship appearance.
Ooh, and do you have them covering as well, that 2.5?
Well, since Florida's favored by 2.5 and I'm taking Auburn to win, yes, I think they will also cover the spread.
Yeah, you know what? I know how odds work and my brain stopped working there for a second. Hey, look, same thing for me. I took Auburn. I had them in my bracket, and I always say I cheer for my bracket, so that's what I'm going with. And yeah, Auburn's going to cover that plus 2.
Yes, they sure will.
I love it. Our brains, we promise they work even in March and April. And it's April now, so March is behind us. Andy, let's go to the nightcap. Duke favored right now by 5.5. It was 4.5 earlier this week, but FanDuel has bumped it a little bit here. Who you got in this one, Mr. Patton?
Well, you said you root for your bracket, so I suppose I'll root for my bracket as well. My bracket has Houston winning the whole thing, so why not take Houston here over Duke? I also think they'll cover since they are not favored in this game as well. Duke is an absolute freight train. It's not going to be easy, but I think Houston has the right coaching, the right veteran experience, the right physicality, the right tempo, as we talked about in the X factors, that I think more than most teams, they are equipped to handle Duke. The size is obviously going to be a huge factor in that game as well, but give me Houston pulling off what would be a bit of an upset here and advancing to the championship game.
In keeping with the bracket cheering theme, I got to go with the Duke Blue Devils, Andy. From the get-go, I had Duke and Auburn as my championship matchup, and I'm going to stick with it, meaning this is the one time in this segment where it's legitimate to ask the question, will Duke cover the spread or not? And I'm going to say yes. I say that if Duke wins, they're going to wind up doing it by 8, which would cover 5.5. Andy, we're going to now move to something that's going to be very fun. I love that FanDuel has given us hypothetical matchup odds for each of Monday night's potential championship matchups. Folks, what you might not know behind the scenes is that my dear friend, Mr. Andy Patton, is a whiz at picking odds.
You're ensuring I'm going to get all of these wrong.
Right, which is why I'm setting you up. It's the announcer's jinx here. You're going to miss every free throw you take for the next year. But legitimately, Andy and I, when we're prepping show notes, I'll often quiz him on like, hey, what do you think the line is for this game at FanDuel? And almost routinely, he has it within 1 point. And so, Andy, that's what we're going to do right now. I want to see how dialed in you are to the brain trust that is FanDuel.com, one of our great sponsors here at Locked On. So we start with the matchup that I have as my national championship matchup, the Duke Blue Devils versus the Auburn Tigers, the top 2 seeds in this tournament. What do you think?
Give me Duke.
That's first off, that's correct.
Cool. 3.5.
Announcers jinx coming through at 6.5.
Wow, that is way too high.
Now,
That's
to be
too
fair,
high. That's too high.
to be fair, I am right with you. That number is wrong and it's incorrect.
They have Houston as a whatever. It's okay. It's fine. I'll accept the results of the FanDuel lines.
All right, but you can still go 3 for 4 here, Andy.
Yeah.
And by the way, you get a plus or minus 1 point buffer.
Oh, okay. So we'll be good.
We'll stick with Auburn, but we'll send it to Auburn versus Houston. Who do you got in this one?
I mean, I know this is not how the odds makers do it, but if they got Houston 1 point favorite, 1 point better favorites against Duke, then maybe it's Houston. I'll say Houston by 1.5. Why not?
Spot on.
Look at that.
You didn't even need the buffer, Andy. Houston minus 1.5 at FanDuel. That makes up for what happened in the first one. Okay, let's stick with Houston and say Houston versus the Florida Gators.
Florida, Houston. I will say Houston 3.5.
My friend, you have a wrong team favored. Florida minus 1.5 over the Houston Cougars.
Okay.
All right, you're 1 for 3. All right, we got to finish this off. Can you bat 500 in this trivia? We're going to stick with Florida, and we're going to take them to Duke because that's the only matchup left. Florida versus Duke. What you got? Keeping in mind how long the odds were in the first hypothetical.
My first instinct, and this is not my guess. My first instinct was Duke 2.5, which is where I think it probably should be. But my guess is that it's more like Duke 5.5.
You have made it within the buffer. Duke 4.5. Way to go, Andy. You hit 2 for 4. And look, here's the truth. If an MLB hitter goes 500 for his career, it's literally the best it's ever been. So I'm giving you credit. All right, Andy, final thing here. When FanDuel also has championships odds for us, just straight up odds, regardless of opponent, Duke leads the way at minus 115. The other 3 schools are all plus. Florida plus 310, Houston plus 430, Auburn plus 550. Andy, this is crazy to me because how often in ever are you going to get the number 1 overall seed with the longest odds in the entirety of the Final Four? This is crazy.
I have to think this has never happened before. Like, I have to think that the number 1 overall seed, first of all, making the Final Four, that happens a fair amount of times. But if the number 1 overall seed makes the Final Four, they're almost always the favorite. They're almost always the favorite. And obviously, it's unique that the other 3 number 1 seeds also made it. And I know that Auburn, they stumbled coming into the tournament, except, all the things we've talked about, the Broome injury may be playing a factor here, although it shouldn't be. But yeah, and the other crazy thing to me is Auburn's the only team that they've played all these teams. They've played them all already. Like that's a huge advantage that you'd think would play into these odds perhaps a little bit more than it is. Yes, I also recognize that what is probably hurting them is the fact that the team they're playing first is the team that beat them in Florida. So I understand why that is playing a role. And obviously the FanDuel's odds believe Duke and Florida will win. That's why they're the 2 hottest.
Well, they also lost to Duke.
Right. And they did lose to Duke. So I understand that is an argument, but I don't know. I'm surprised that Auburn is. I would have Duke number 1. I absolutely. So I think that makes sense. And Duke being the one that has the odds under right now totally makes sense. But sure, I'm surprised to see Auburn this far behind Florida and Houston.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's like, okay, maybe they're not the best odds, but they're also not second. Okay. Yeah. Oh, they're also not that last. Okay. Yeah. Weird. It's crazy, Andy. And if you are a person that likes to, choose to use some money, feels like a good value to me, Andy. Yeah. I'm just putting that out there in the universe. Go ahead. Take us on.
Well, 3 of these 4 programs have been to the national championship before. Auburn being the team that has not. But yet, despite that, none of these coaches have won the big one. We're going to talk about that and some more Final Four storylines coming up here in just a second. Well, Isaac, those of you who are like us know that the NCAA tournament has been incredibly draining on our sleep schedules, and that's why 5 Hour Energy has our back. The extra sunshine with daylight saving times mean there's more time for fun, but sometimes you just need a little boost to power through. So whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament or when Isaac and I are going live, you're watching Locked On College Basketball with us, maybe you're squeezing in an extra round after work, maybe you're just trying to keep up with your busy day. Either way, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. Like I said, we've been staying up late covering the NCAA tournament, and I tell you what, 5 Hour Energy is the jolt that we need to help keep us going the next day, whether we're here at home in our studio, whether we're in Dallas doing the bracket breakdown for Amazon Fire TV. 5 Hour Energy is easy to grab and helps keep us feeling refreshed. So head to 5hourenergy.com now to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12 or 24 pack delivered right to your door. And if you need one now, grab 5 Hour Energy Shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're literally everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. All right, Isaac, continuing our conversation here as we get ready for these Final Four matchups on Saturday. And of course, the big one, the Natty coming your way on Monday evening. We're going to talk some storylines here about some of these coaches, about some of these programs, their history, what it would mean for them to be in that national championship game and to potentially be winning said national championship. And I'm going to throw it to you first, Isaac, for a question about kind of who needs this the most? Because we know that like one of these programs is not like the other in the sense that they've been to a whole bunch of Final Fours and have won a whole bunch of national championships. But in terms of a program out of these four, which program do you feel needs this win on Saturday or even a win on Monday as well, more than the others?
I think I would start by figuring out who it isn't, Andy. And what I mean by that is like, you just alluded to this, but Duke, literally the royalist of the blue bloods of this Final Four. John Shire early enough in his career that just making the Final Four is a big old feather in his cap. I think, Florida, fewer championships, but the same basic argument is there, both for Florida and Todd Golden, right? And so then that would bring me to either Houston or Auburn. Neither have won a national championship, but Houston has at least been to the championship.
This would be Houston's first. This would be Houston's first championship appearance.
In the modern era, right? Or ever?
Third ever, first of the modern era.
Right. Okay. So then that would lead me to think that it's Auburn. They've only ever, this is their second ever Final Four, 2019 being the other, but they lost in that one to Virginia on the Kyle Guy free throws. That was one of that Virginia run, man, is just bonkers. Anyway, and so I think for that reason, just Auburn to kind of continue to solidify themselves among the nation's elite basketball programs, which is what Bruce Pearl has done for this program. So I think in terms of needing it the most, if I root out the ones that need it the least, I think that leads me to Auburn. And any difference or disagreement with that?
Not really, no. I think the only thing I would add is from a historical perspective, I think it's Auburn, but also from a this season perspective. Like Auburn dominated all year long.
Good
point.
Like
they had the best resume in college basketball. They had the most quad one wins by like 1,000 or whatever it was. Like their resume all season long was the best one. And there was some pushback. There were some people who thought they should have moved off the AP ranking when they lost to Alabama. By and large, this team had the best resume from pretty much the beginning of the season until the end. So not winning a championship would look like a failure, even though I don't think that it would be necessarily, but I think that there's a bit more pressure on them in that regard. And so I think that there is some pressure on Auburn to win it all more than any other one. But I think the actual person who has the most pressure on them is Kelvin Sampson. And it's close between Sampson and Pearl. Like you said, with Shire and Golden, they're both young enough in their career. Shire's won one as a player. Golden, I think he's
an assistant for Shire.
Right. Yeah, as an assistant as well. So I think for me, Sampson is the coach that this kind of matters the most in the sense that not getting it, he's older. He's going to turn 70 next year, so there's not as much opportunity. And so I think that while Houston losing to Duke wouldn't be a disappointment, it would be two recent Final Four appearances without an appearance in the championship for Houston, and that's going to start to rub some people the wrong way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, Andy. I like all of that. And obviously in this Florida Auburn game, we've got the Bruce Pearl Todd Golden connection. Bruce Pearl hired Todd Golden from Columbia when he came to Auburn. Really, really good stuff. And Andy, as we think about these Final Fours, for Florida, it's their first since the Billy Donovan era, their sixth total. For Auburn, we just mentioned it. It's their second ever, 2019, the other. For Houston, it's their seventh ever, but it's just their second of the modern era. 2021, if I remember correctly, is the other. For Duke, it's their 18th ever Final Four, 14th of the modern era. And Andy, that leads me to another quiz moment with you. Let's have a little trivia time here. Mr. Patton, there are 7 schools all time who have made double-digit Final Fours my question to you is, who are they? I will give you a caveat. One of these schools has made it to 10, but one was technically vacated, so they have 9. But I'm just, they made it. I'm counting it. So 7 schools have made it to 10 Final Fours. Let me see how many you can get.
So 7 schools, including Duke.
Including Duke's 18.
Right. So I have 6 more schools to guess.
Yes. Unless you just want to not mention Duke, and then you have 7 to guess.
UCLA.
Yes. UCLA is one of 2 schools that has a vacated. It's 19, putting them second all time, but they did have one vacated in 1980. If you count that, they and Duke are tied for second at 18.
Kentucky.
Kentucky, 4th all time with 17. They're all bunched up right there.
Kansas.
Kansas is 5th, right behind Kentucky with 16. So if you don't count UCLA's vacated, it goes 19, 18, 17, 16, UCLA, Duke, Kentucky, Kansas. I mean, that's just straight up blue blood royalty right there.
UCLA, Duke, Kentucky, Kansas. Love it, love it, love it. North Carolina.
North Carolina tops the list with 21, the only school in history that has 20 or more.
Should have known. That's why we're doing this trivia. Got it.
No.
I'm just messing. I'm not sure if I would have guessed this before, but I'm going to guess it now.
Louisville doesn't have double digits, and I can't remember off the top of my head how many they can, but while you make your next guess, I'll pull it up.
Okay, let's see.
Indiana, also not on this list, and I can pull that up too as I'm getting there to the Louisville of it, but keep guessing.
Michigan State.
Michigan State, 6th on our list with exactly 10, Andy.
Okay.
10.
So how many am I missing then?
You were missing just one. By the way, Louisville and Indiana both have 8, although Louisville, Andy, you know what? If we're being technical like I am with this other school,
they should be on there too, right?
Because they have 2 vacated.
Freaking
so
Louisville.
Need 10. Yep. So I guess we can call it 8.
We can call it 8. Okay. Who am I missing then?
When you said Michigan State, you were in the correct conference.
I was in the correct
conference. That you might not think because they're technically more a football powerhouse.
Yeah. Big Ten football powers who have been to a lot of Final Fours. I mean, I'm inclined to guess Michigan.
It would actually be their biggest rival,
Ohio State. Dang it.
Ohio State.
That's what I was about to say when I said Michigan first. Wouldn't have thought of them though. That's not one I would have probably pulled.
Yeah. Well, and part of it with Ohio State, they haven't been since 2012, and so it's been a minute. But there you go. That is, Andy, the I guess now 8 schools that have actually been to double-digit Final Fours. Andy, fun show. I'm curious how many people got any of those correct. I'm sure there are lots. So, Mr. Patton, what a fun show. We will be back, folks, tomorrow on Saturday after the game. We're going to do a live show as we always do after the 2 games end. We've got a couple responsibilities. We've got first for our Amazon bracket breakdown stuff, so you can catch those on all your Fire TV channels, but then we will be live on YouTube. Make plans to tune in with us. If you haven't subscribed to the show on YouTube, make sure to do that now so you get notified as soon as we go live. As always, Andy Patton, apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes, and cheers to Mick Bruins. Until tomorrow, we'll see you after these games. The national championship will be set. For now, though, peace.